All right. Welcome everyone to the February 8th meeting of the British Empire Study Group. I really thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, you're in for a treat. It's a really good way to enter into philately. Before I go any further, I just want to acknowledge that we did lose two very good people recently to the hobby, to very good friends to philately. Nancy Clark, who was running the Boston 2016. And we also lost Harlan Stone, really great guy at the Collectors Club. I love seeing him and Helen. They're just two of my favorite people, but yeah. So we'll just have a brief moment of silence for those two people. And now we're going to go on to the man of the hour, my favorite Valentine, Mr. Ed Graboski. And was there a 1 penny rate from the British colonies to the United States in the early 1900s? And I'm going to turn it over to Rob Lutens to go ahead and introduce.
Thank you, Joan. Welcome, everybody. Since we're close to Valentine's Day, I think we can use some of Ed's analogies this evening to show the similarities of philately and relationships. For the average collector, a collection is a decades-long commitment. In every good relationship, an attentive partner is always looking to expand the relationship, learning new things about the partner, even after decades of monogamous commitment. When Dr. Ed Grabowski began collecting the New York Institute of Science material, his focus was on the Institute and its business. Collecting material from this fraudulent enterprise was exhilarating, and for many years, the relationship was a happy one, and Ed was completely satisfied with the collection. However, the hobby is not about standing still. One day, Ed began looking at the collection in a different way, and he noticed a trend in the materials that seemed to contradict common knowledge. Now, prior to 1874, sending a letter overseas could be complicated. Most rates depended on the countries that were involved. The Universal Postal Union brought in a standard rate of 2.5D per half ounce. This rate was introduced in 1891 for many countries, and in 1892, the rate applied worldwide. So why is Ed seeing a penny rate being used from a Great Britain colony to the United States? Or how do you analyze data in your collection that seems to contradict the common wisdom? How do you stand up for your data when it seems to disagree with the establishment? We'll investigate those ideas with Ed this evening. Let me give you a little background on our presenter, Dr. Ed Grabowski. He spent his entire professional career as a chemist with Merck Research Labs and started collecting stamps just after World War II. Like many of us, he started out collecting the whole world and then specialized in the United States and then went on to France. Fate ultimately brought him to collect French colonials. It was while collecting this area that he first discovered there were covers related to using the mails to perpetrate mail order fraud on an international scale. This fascinating category is now his current philatelic endeavor, in tandem with his study of the postal history of the French colonial allegorical group type and their era. In 2006, his Guadalupe postal history exhibit won the Grand Prix d'Honneur at the Washington Show. In 2014, he received the American Philatelic Society Luff Award for philatelic research. During 2013 and 2014, it was his pleasure to serve as president of the Collectors Club of New York. Given that his philatelic interests are now worldwide, he always asks that his fellow collectors inform him of any fraud material they encounter in their own collecting interests. So, without further ado, I give you our presenter this evening, Dr. Ed Grabowski.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. And I'm going to share the screen now. Load my presentation. Oops. And we'll bring it to presentation mode. Is everything okay, Joan? Yes. Okay. So here's the title of my talk. Was there a 1 penny rate from the British colonies to the United States in the early 1900s? And I'm going to show a study of this question via mail to the New York Institute of Science which was a group of mail-order fraudsters in Rochester, New York. Well, let me just remove something that's in my way. Okay. This is the conundrum that I'll be addressing today. Here are two letters from the British colony of Transvaal, okay, both in May 1912. The one at the left is franked at 1 penny, and that's all, and it went right on to Rochester, New York. The one at the right is also franked at 1 penny. It's from the 13th of May, 1912, 1 week earlier, and it's received a completely different treatment. It arrived in Rochester, New York at 6 cents due. So what's the rate? Is it 1 penny, or is it the 6 cents comes to the equivalent of 2.5 pennies? So that's the conundrum that I'll be trying to address or presenting my thoughts on. And I'd like to start out with the Graboski method in philately to tell you a little bit about myself and how I do things. I pick a topic that's of interest to me. And the French colonial group type occupied me from 1976 till I sold the collection in 2019. And now I'm doing mail order fraud since about 2000, which actually grew out of the group type collection. I tend to gather material profusely in the areas I'm interested in. The British might say I hoover it up. The hoovering, of course, depends on availability of material and the availability of my bank account. When I think I have a critical mass, I study it intensely and try to come up with new or at least unusual conclusions. I publish, lecture, and exhibit these to get as much feedback as possible from the philatelic community. And with the French colonial group type, I put together a collection of 2,700 covers from the 29 colonies that use the issue. And this resulted in about 50 articles, 100 lectures, and 7 exhibits. Seems like a lot, but remember, it's over 40 years. This talk comes from a collection of New York Institute of Science covers, which has just passed 500 worldwide covers. So with that introduction, what is the New York Institute of Science? They were a mail order fraud organization based in Rochester, New York from 1900 to 1914. They sold a home study course in hypnotism and magnetism, which enabled one to cure diseases, influence people, achieve success, and make money. They also created new fraud organizations as they became more and more successful. And an example is the Cartilage Company, which dealt with a device that could increase your height from 1 to 5 inches. The New York Institute of Science was the most successful of the 4 American mail order fraud organizations that I'm studying, and they were convicted of mail order fraud and put out of business by the American Medical Association and various government agencies in 1914. Prior to their conviction, they had made more than $32 million in today's dollars, according to the court records. And that total could be quite a bit more. Here's a newspaper article from November 1914, Rochester newspaper. Rochester men arrested on accusation of making fraudulent use of the mails. And it shows some of the principals of the New York Institute of Science who were alleged to have made millions. This is an example on the left of a booklet that they sent out to good prospective clients. This was an informational booklet. You notice it tells about the marvels of personal magnetism and hypnotism, and notes that personal magnetism governs the world. And they show a picture of this building, this large building, and this flag says NY Institute of Science, and presumably that was their building. Just by chance, I received my doctorate in chemistry from the University of Rochester, and I lived in Rochester for 4 years. I never saw this building in all 4 years in Rochester. It's a little reminiscent of this building, which is a famous landmark building in Rochester, the Powers Building, from the 1870s. And the bottom line is that the building pictured in the New York Institute of Science booklet never existed. Like the New York Institute of Science, it was a fraud. So here are examples. Well, here at the left is an example of the correspondence course in personal magnetism, hypnotism, mesmerism, magnetic healing that the New York Institute of Science sold. It was $5 to $6 for a copy. That's quite a bit in 1900 dollars. The founder and president of the New York Institute of Science was one Xenophon Lamott Sage. That's a nom de fraud for a fellow who was really named E. Virgil Neal. In the center, you see the same correspondence course, but in Italian. The New York Institute of Science operated in all of the major European languages. That's very important relative to their profit motives. And at the right, if you completed the basic course, they had a higher course. And here are courses in German, and you see an example of that course in German. Most unusual thing is the New York Institute of Science was most successful in, of all places, the Hungarian portion of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I have more than 150 covers addressed to them from Hungary. It's really quite amazing. And apropos of how I do things, this caused me to write a chapter on the success of the New York Institute of Science for the 2018 annual volume of the European Academy of Philately. This volume specifically focused on the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Fortunately for me, a group of, or a society of German collectors who specialize in Hungary, both stamps and postal history, caught my article and asked if they could translate it and publish it in their annual volume. And I was most happy to give them the permission. So I got two chapter level publications out of one effort in publishing that article. So with that introduction on the New York Institute of Science, let's take a look at British 1-penny rates in the early 1900s. In the we had a 1-penny rate from the United Kingdom to the USA. This was a special rate, 1 pence in lieu of the 2.5-penny rate, which was the normal UPU rate. There was also a 1-penny rate from the United Kingdom to its offices and colonies. There was a 1-penny rate amongst the British colonies. But the colonialists often thought there was a 1-penny rate to the United States. And it was suggested to me by some British collectors in Britain that maybe they remembered that the USA was once a British colony and they still considered it such. My thesis is there was no 1-penny rate between the British colonies and the USA, or was there? And what I plan to do is examine those two statements in some detail as we go along in this talk. Here are some typical New York Institute of Science letters at the 2.5-penny UPU rate. One is from London. These are common covers with Edward VII. And one is from the suburb of Richmond, Surrey, which is showing the stamps of George V. You notice the second one is addressed to a May Edna Wilder. She took a very prominent part, it played a prominent part in the New York Institute of Science, and I'll have more to say about her in a couple of moments. What I'd like to do now is just show you a variety of those 1-penny covers that are part of this collection. Here's two examples, one from Birmingham and one from the New Cross Southeast London office. You'll note both are on pre-printed envelopes. These envelopes were sent out by the New York Institute of Science to potential clients as part of the information package. And the other thing is, during the early 1900s, the New York Institute of Science sold its incoming mail to the philatelic trade. And this is what's enabled me as a collector to gather so much of this material. It's because it entered the philatelic trade early in the scheme of things. Here are other examples, one from Dublin, Ireland, with the machine line cancel that Charles Verge told us so much about 2 meetings ago. And the one on the right is from Glasgow, Scotland. So it's very clear the 1 penny rate applies to all of the United Kingdom. And what we see here, and we frequently see on these letters, are department numbers, okay? They really didn't have these departments. These are actually codes indicating to which ads the senders were responding. Ads were placed in newspapers, journals, and other local periodicals throughout the world and in all languages. And here's an example of an ad from a German monthly journal. This was on the back cover, and it says, "Hypnotism, the way in life, happily achieves success." And over on the left, what brings success? Not hard work, not high birth, not luck, but innate power. And they have free lessons, and a rare book will be given away. And you'll note, you're told to write to the New York Institute of Science, Abteilung AA2, that's Department AA2, which identifies this particular advertisement. Getting back to 1 penny rates, here's one from Worcester on a piece of 1 penny postal stationery. When I looked at this closely, the plate is quite worn on the printing of this effigy of Edward VII, and also there's very little detail up at the top here. This plate is highly worn. You can see right around his nose, and there are other problems throughout the plate. But the other thing that intrigued me, it's about 5 degrees off center. So what's going on here? This is actually a postal stationery cutout, which was perfectly legal in the United Kingdom. You could do that. Other places, like in the French area, you couldn't do that. I told you that they created new scams as they became more successful. And from Barnsley, England, we have this letter addressed to the Cartilage Company. And what did the Cartilage Company do? They sold a device based on the rack of the Inquisition, which would increase your height 1 to 5 inches. And this is the instruction book for the device for the Japanese market, quite unusual. And this is K. Leo Mingus, the fellow who created this scam, demonstrating how his device worked. His feet are anchored to the floor. The device is anchored to the ceiling, and it could be wrapped under one arm, both arms, and there was actually a portion that would go around the neck and the chin, and you would pull on the pulleys, the ropes with the pulleys, and give yourself the old stretcheroo, similar to what the Catholic Church did during the Inquisition. And here's a typical example of a device that could achieve those results. And you see the letter is addressed to the Cartilage Company, not in Rochester, but a suburb immediately adjacent to Rochester, a fashionable suburb. Chances are that's where Mingus lived, and this letter was going directly to him. May Edna Wilder was asked to develop a special scam for the ladies, which she did, and you see the advertising booklet for that scam. And on the right, a letter showing a nice piece of postal stationery from Leeds to May Edna Wilder. Finally, we can capture the 1 penny rates in the 3 penny registered rate coming out of the United Kingdom. 2 examples. One on the left, the New York is franked at 3 pennies from Samaras, Jersey, a very, very unusual origin. These people were getting through to people on the island of Jersey. It's addressed to the New York State Publishing Company, which was the publishing arm of the New York Institute of Science. And the one on the right is from Stockton-on-Tees, a small village on the east coast of England. And finally, there's a 3 penny registered rate, which comprises 1 penny postage, 2 pennies registration, from County Limerick in Ireland. Very, very nice example, and you can see the rates are shown in the printing of the stamp at the right. So that takes care of the United Kingdom. what about examples of 1 penny rates in lieu of the proper 2.5 penny UPU rate from the colonies to the New York Institute of Science? For the most part, these examples illustrate how British colonies handled underfranked mail. And it's my conclusion, based on both the French area and the British area, that it was the responsibility of the originating office to identify and properly mark the underpaid mail. Occasionally, this did not happen, and the mail traveled to destination without a penalty, creating what appeared to be a 1 penny rate. It's of interest to note that most of the originating offices are small towns and villages, and a lot of the mail I'll show you is franked at 1 penny or 1.5 pence or 15 French centimes or 3 US cents short, which brought about an equivalent a fine to raise the rate to 30 centimes or 6 US cents due. And it was the arrival office that was responsible for collecting the due amount in its own currency. So moving to the colonies, here we have a proper 2.5 penny UPU rate from the post office at Crossroads, Jamaica, which is a suburb of Kingston. Nothing special, a very ordinary everyday letter. But I do want to reiterate again that my conclusion has been there was no official 1 penny rate between the British colonies and the USA during this period. However, the British colonials appear to have been aware that there was a special 1 penny rate between the United Kingdom and the USA, and clearly knew of the 1 penny rate amongst the British colonies in the United Kingdom. That's the Empire rate. This is the rate that they used to write home with. So they often assumed that there was a 1 penny rate between the British colonies and the USA. And this created the appearance of a 1 penny rate if letters were not properly treated as due letters. That's the operational thesis. And here's an example from the village of Little London, Jamaica, okay? If you look, you have to look carefully at the stamp. It is the 1 penny stamp. The postmark is Little London. Again, that requires careful observation. And you note the letter was struck with a T in triangle for due, a 30 centimes hand stamp for the amount due in French currency, and the collect 6 cents postage on arrival at the Hudson Terminal in New York. So it's 1 cent prepaid on 2.5 pence, 15 centimes short, and 6 cents US due. And just to show you, this is a current map of Jamaica. You can see Kingston, the capital major city, where all the action is, and way out on the western end of the island of Jamaica, we have the village of Little London. So this was quite a small area back in 1900. From Jamaica, let's go over to British Guiana. And here, I have to note that British Guiana was not on a pence, shillings, pounds money system. They were on a cents, dollar money system, where 2 cents in British Guiana currency equaled 1 penny in British currency. So this letter was posted at a 2 cent rate from the Georgetown, that's the capital of British Guiana, suburb of Kitty, on February 19th, 1909. And you'll notice 3 due markings, a T in circle for due, the boxed postage due hand stamp, where they normally wrote in the amount due, but in this case, they had the violet 30 centime hand stamp, so they stamped this letters. This is one of the premier covers in the collection. I had a fight with a number of British collectors to get this in an auction, and it represents the confluence of mail order fraud and rare postal history. And this is a close-up showing this 2 cent equals one penny attempt from British Guiana. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a charge due from the New York office. It missed that. In all probability, this letter did travel with the due mail and was charged 6 cents due in Rochester. By the way, here's a painting, a period painting of Kitty, British Guiana, and you can see it was not too much of a fashionable town. Here's another letter from the village of Malali, British Guiana, receiving the same treatment. It's a 2-cent postal stationery envelope. It got a T in triangle, 30 centimes due, 6 cents to be collected. That was put on arrival in New York, and then it went up to Rochester for final delivery. And here's an example of one of the letters that causes this problem. It's from New Amsterdam, British Guiana, February 19th, 1912. It's posted at a 2-cent rate, same time period as the letters I've been showing, which is equivalent to 1 penny. And there are no due charges. There's no other stamps on this. This is a letter to the New York Institute of Science branch office in Philadelphia that was called the American College of Sciences. The same founders as the New York Institute of Science in Rochester. They sold the same fraud schemes, but this office had a limited history and not much mail was produced. The shortage was not noted by the sending office, and the letter was forwarded to Rochester from Philadelphia, all for the incorrect 2 cent equals 1 penny rate. It has a Georgetown backstamp of February 24th, a Philadelphia arrival, and then was forwarded to Rochester. So from the American area, let's go over to Africa, specifically the colonies of Natal, Transvaal, and the Cape Province. Here are some examples of attempts at 1 penny rates at various times from various places in Natal. The first is from Greytown. In 1905, you see it got a T 15 centime hand stamp for 15 centimes short, and then a proper 6 cents due when it arrived in New York. And one from Utrecht in 1912, and it got a T hand stamp, a 30 centime hand stamp for the amount due, and then the Hudson Terminal hand stamp as to what was due in the United States. The due hand stamps were of 2 types, those showing the amount of short payment, as you see on the left, and those showing the actual amount due, as you see on the right. You can see the cover on the right is a particularly attractive one with 4 different hand stamps, each of which is struck very, very nicely. Now we come to this letter from Port Shepstone, Natal, 1905. It's not 6 cents due, it's 7 cents due. What's going on here? Well, I'm not sure I know what's going on here. I have an explanation. I think a good postal historian can explain any cover, whether it's right or wrong. You have to be the judge. This cover was sent at a 1 penny rate from Natal and received the standard T15 hand stamp for shortage. Okay, that's the amount short. It arrived in New York and it received the New York binocular 6 cents due hand stamp. But in fact, it was charged 7 cents due on arrival. And the question is why? Well, I'd like to call your attention to the address portion of the letter. You notice the original address, which is written in black, says New York Institute of Science, Department HJ6, New York, USA. The city of Rochester was not included in the original address, so this letter had to go to a special desk to provide a proper address. And when it arrived at this desk, you can see in violet ink, they put in 39 State Avenue, Rochester, New York. Okay. Normally, this service was free. However, combined with an underpaid letter, which was already causing problems for the arrival office, the letter was charged an extra 1 cent due for additional service. That's my explanation. I presented this to a fellow named Harry Charles, who's an expert in postage due issues and their use in the United States. And he considered this a reasonable explanation, but could provide no documentation from postal regulations that it truly existed. I also gave it to Roger Brody, a good friend who's very knowledgeable on early 20th century American mails. And he wasn't that comfortable with this explanation. And he said he wasn't because stuff happens, okay, Brody concept. So I consider this item still a cover under study. And we can look at the back and we see after it arrived at the New York office, it was transferred to what I believe is a TPO, and it was backstamped with the TPO duplex hand stamp. And you can see it right here underneath the pair of 2-cent postage dues. Those were put over that hand stamp. And then they very consciously added a 3-cent postage due with the TPO hand stamp and canceled that postage due. So it looks like it was really charged 7 cents. And right now I'm looking for information on New York TPOs and seeing what I can find in postal regulations in the postal books. As an aside, I'd like to show you a handling of an improper address, typical handling. I have to go over to a French letter, which is franked at 25 centimes. That's the correct rate. And you notice that this one was addressed to the New York Institute of Science, United States of America. And then Charles S. Clark, Vice President, Secretary General. That's a very, very poor address. I mean, it's basically to the whole United States. So it went to this special desk, and correcting it to the Rochester address was no big deal, because the New York office probably received at least hundreds of letters to the New York Institute of Science, if not thousands. And so what they did was pen in, adding to the address to make it deliverable, and then they used this auxiliary hand stamp, deficiency in address supplied by New York Post Office, and a clerk's number. But there was no charge for this service, okay? It's the additional charge, the additional problem with the deficiency, the other that caused the added postage due. Moving over to Transvaal, I'll just show you a few letters. These are the common attempts at 1 penny. Seeing 1 penny letters is, to me at least, quite rare. Here's one from Posterville, Transvaal, which got a manuscript T, then the octagonal T, 30 centimes, the New York postage due. And that's more or less standard handling. And this is the one from Glagte, Transvaal, that I showed in that second slide. And you can see this got a T hand stamp for due, T 30 centimes for the amount. Again, a cover with beautiful, beautiful strikes from a desirable post office. So it's a nice piece of postal history. And then one from Zuni, Transvaal, another small village, where it initially got a manuscript T in circle, and then the proper postal markings and delivery to New York. So I'm seeing these attempts at 1 penny rates. The last one from Transvaal is from the village of Colesburg in 1912. You see a red T and then the due marking. And I only have one from the Cape Colony from Graf Reinet, South Africa, April 6th, 1912. And there they didn't use these fancy due stamps, just a simple T and circle. And they let the arrival office in New York add the proper amount due, which they had no problem with at 6 cents. And then this is the letter in question now again from Potchefstroom, Transvaal, May 20th, 1912. And my thesis is the short payment was missed by the originating office, and the letter was just delivered without due payment, went through the mails. If that initial office does not recognize the due, it goes through the mails. And here you see a postcard from Potchefstroom, and this is the Dutch Reformed Church, showing the origins of the town, and of course in the background, the King's Hotel, showing at that time the current status of the British presence in the area. And just to show you that the 2.5 penny rate is not a fantasy, yes, I have letters at the 2.5 penny rate, very nice one from Berkeley West, Transvaal, just franked with halfpenny stamps, and one from the village of Standerton, Transvaal, to May Edna Wilder, with a nice combination to make the 2.5 penny rate. And finally, from the Cape of Good Hope itself, this letter from Cariega in August 1903 is actually a double weight, 2 times 2.5 pennies, registered 2 pence letter at the 7 pence rate, addressed to the American College of Sciences. It's actually quite a rare letter, and I'm happy to say I purchased it from Harmer's International. How about that? A plug for the home team there. And this is where the village is located today, quite a distance from Cape Town, and it still exists. So with that, let's leave British Africa and move over to British India. And this is one of the most amazing maps I've ever seen. Somebody has attempted to encapsulate British history in India from 1735 to the 1890s in one map. And you show in different colors the areas as they were added to the British annexation. You see the Indian dependent states. You see the boundaries of British India, which run along here. And you notice they capture in Burma and Mandalay, which became under British administration. It also captures the Portuguese and British settlements. Here's Goa, and then here's the French, Pondicherry, Caracal, Yannan, Chandnagore, and Maha. All the French settlements are nicely there. They show the areas from the 1870 mutiny, areas of major uprisings and other British campaigns. It's a marvelous letter and pardon me, map. And it shows the British occupation of Burma. So let's start there. Here's one of these do letters posted in Mandalay, Burma, franked with an Indian 1 anna stamp, because the Burma post office was under Indian administration. And the 1 anna stamp is in lieu of the proper 2.5 anna rate. And this received the standard Indian due treatment, which was manuscript 30 centimes for the amount due with the T in triangle, and the 6 cents due in New York. And it's addressed to the Wilder scam. And this gives me an opportunity not only to show a close-up of the piece, but also a picture of the very, very, very fashionable May Edna Wilder, who ran that special scam for the ladies. So moving over to India proper, here we have an example of the, again, standard 2.5 anna rate from 1903 from the Sadar Bazaar office in the city of Nagpur. And you see it's based on a halfpenny printed matter envelope brought to the 2.5 penny rate with 2 different Victoria stamps for a nice combination. And it actually has back stamps showing the New York paid all cancel and the Rochester arrival. So it's a nice example of the 2.5 penny rate. This is another example where it's built into the registered rate of 4.5 annas, 2.5 annas postage to registration from the city of Neemuch in India, from a British soldier in the telegraph office. So we can get that information from this cover, and there's where Neemuch is located. So here are a number of examples of 1 anna rates, attempted 1 anna rates from India, which is equal to 1 pence. I have not seen a 1 anna rate from India go through the mails and reach its final destination. This one is from Firozpur. Again, these are going to be from out of the way areas. Standard treatment, one from Sadra, India, standard treatment, okay, for due mail. Sadra is noted for its Indian fort, which of course saw all sorts of wars, but amongst the Indians and between the British and the Indians. Again, examples of attempts at the 1 penny rate from Ridge, India, and Saranbam, India. The latter is, again, a very nicely constructed cover with all the markings properly there, including the initials of the clerk who processed this particular due letter. And finally, yes, I do have something from a big city. Karachi is the largest city today in Pakistan. This letter is addressed to the Ocala Laboratory, which was a new scam of the New York Institute of Science under Dr. Koresh. Okay, you can see that in the address. The Ocala Laboratory sold fake treatments for diseases of the eye. And this is the only letter I've ever seen to this entity, even though it was a big part of the New York Institute of Science. They did not sell their mail to the philatelic trade, so there is not a lot of it around. And from India, we go over now to Australia, and particularly focused on the states of Victoria, South Australia, and New South Wales. And from Melbourne, Victoria, we see an attempt at a 1 penny rate, nicely canceled with the Melbourne continuous roller cancel, with a striking strike of the T30 centimes for the amount due, because this is underpaid at 1 penny and collecting 6 cents due. It's also to the Mayedna Wilder scam. From Two Wells, South Australia, and this is a very desirable small office. You see this example where we get good strikes of their T30 centimes due stamp and the Two Wells date stamp. A nice example of that. And a picture of life at Two Wells. You can see this is the hotel and probably the main pub, and there's the gentry of the town gathered for some sort of meeting and probably concluding with a couple of pints at the local bar. From New South Wales, we have this one from Forest Reefs, again, a small town there, to the publishing arm of the New York Institute of Science. And New South Wales due stamp actually included the designation of the state with the T in 30 and the proper 6 centimes correct. And finally, the last example from New South Wales is this one with the rare box due hand stamp. There are only 4 examples of this recorded, where it says deficiency 15, fine 15, 30 centimes due based on this 1 pence franking, with the American postage 6 cents due. Again, another one of these covers that's at the confluence of mail order fraud and postal history, also to the Wilder scam. I want to take a little stop here. And before we continue, I would like to show application of the Brody principle, as Roger calls it, where he says stuff happens. Here's a cover I have no understanding of as to what happened. Possibly somebody in the audience can help me out. It was posted at an incorrect 2 penny rate in lieu of the standard 2.5 penny rate on a TPO coming into Victoria, and it has the octagonal hand stamp of the TPO, downtrained Victoria. And the letter is correctly hand stamped with a T 5 centimes for 5 centimes short, which was a halfpenny short, and it should be 1 penny or 2 cents US due. But the short hand stamp was obliterated in, I don't know, but most likely Australia, maybe New York. There's a transit via Melbourne on the back, and a Rochester arrival on August 19th, 1906. So what's going on here? Why was this due stamp obliterated by someone? I have no idea. But to show you I'm not crazy, we have proper treatment of a letter posted at the 2 penny rate from Adelaide, South Australia in 1912. It's franked at 2 pence. It's a halfpenny short relative to 2 penny rate. It was properly struck with an encircled 10 centimes due. 10 French centimes equaled 1 British pence equals 2 US cents. And when it arrived in New York, it got the binocular due 2 cents. So we have very, very proper treatment of this letter as opposed to the one coming in on the TPO. And finally, just one from Perth showing that the rate was indeed 2.5 pennies. going into the United States. So now we go on to the colony of New Zealand as our last stop. New Zealand consisted of 2 islands, a South Island and a Northern Island. Auckland, near the northern part of the Northern Island. This was the major commercial center, the port where the ships called to transit the mails to the United States. We have the capital, Wellington, at the bottom of the North Island. I'll draw your attention to the city of Invercargill, which is located almost at the southern tip of New Zealand. That'll be part of the talk. Yes, there was a 2.5 penny rate from New Zealand. Okay, this is a letter from the small village of Marura on August 3rd, 1906. You can see it's nicely franked with 2 1-penny stamps and a halfpenny stamp for the 2.5 penny rate. It has transits. Both of these villages are close to Auckland. Has a transit via Pokeno on August 3rd, arrived in Auckland on August 3rd, and then proceeded on to the United States. So there was a 2-penny rate, a 2.5 penny rate operational to the United States at the time. So my thesis is data thus far suggests there was no penny rate to the from the British colonies to the United States. A few examples at the 1 penny rate have been recorded. I have about, it's either 4 or 5, but nothing to suggest the existence of this as a genuine rate. Certainly, if it was a genuine rate, we should see a plethora of 1 penny rates, which the people were trying to get, but weren't, based on all the do mail I've showed you. The examples that have traveled through at 1 penny have made it through the mails because the post offices of origin did not note a deficiency in the rate. The question is, are there any examples of covers contrary to this view? And unfortunately, or maybe happily, New Zealand stands alone. I have 7 covers showing a 1 penny rate, 1 showing the 3 penny registered rate, 1 penny postage, 2 pennies registration, and no covers showing an underpaid 1 penny rate. So what's going on here? We don't see that underpaid 1 penny rate. And here are the examples. The village of Havelock and the city of Christchurch, okay? There's no stamps have been removed. There are no additional markings. These are clean 1 penny rates. 2 more from small villages in New Zealand. Again, very clean, no evidence of other stamps. 2 more with roller cancels at the 1 penny rate. Again, these are small towns. And even 1 from Christchurch on postal stationery, which shows the 1 penny rate. And from Invercargill, that city way at the south, we have a letter posted at the 3 penny registry rate, July 19th, 1 penny postage, 2 pennies registration. It didn't get to Auckland until August 2nd from July 19th. That's a pretty long time for that journey up through the 2 islands. It arrives in Seattle, crossing the Pacific on August 25th, and is carried to Rochester by a set of Northern Railroad rides in the United States. Very nice examples showing the routing of this cover. And here's Invercargill, the post office for this city. And I have to show you what it's famous for. In December 1905, Invercargill voted in local prohibition of alcohol sales. This lasted for 40 years until voted out by returning servicemen from the Second World War. And it just brings up the thought, beware the laws that you promulgate and the havoc that they might bring. No beer in Invercargill for 40 years. So what's it all about, Alfie? What we've run into is the New Zealand Universal 1 penny postage rate. New Zealand Postmaster General Joseph Ward, later Prime Minister, campaigned for New Zealand to launch a universal 1 penny post rate. On New Year's Day in 1901, any letter under a ½ ounce, whether it traveled across the country or to international borders, such as the United Kingdom or foreign countries, cost exactly the same, 1 penny. And what this was doing was recognizing the importance of international mails for communication and commerce from New Zealand, and giving the people of New Zealand every opportunity to make use of this communication. So the 1 penny postage, universal postage, which was initiated in 1901. A special 1 penny stamp was created for such, and then the stamp was revised in 1909. And it's the revised stamp that I show on these examples. You can see it says Dominion of New Zealand, 1 penny, and in the banderoles, universal postage. Initially, countries such as the United States, France, Germany, and others did not accept mail at this rate, as already noted by that 1906 cover that I showed you before. You can see that's the first universal postage stamp and the 2.5 penny rate. This is because the United States refused to accept the 1 penny rate at this time. But one ahead. After 1908, it appears that the rate was accepted by the United States, and that became the official rate for New Zealand. And that nicely explains this letter, which is at a double 1 penny rate for a letter that reached the ½ to 1 ounce weight category. Okay, just a simple double weight letter, nothing special. Now, I have to go out of the New York Institute of Science for just a little note in added proof and show a cover from Professor Segno from the Cook Islands. What you have to know is the Cook Islands were a dominion of New Zealand. New Zealand rates were applicable to their postal system. And what we have here is a cover to the operation of Professor A. Victor Segno via his wife, Annie Del Segno, who is treasurer of the American Institute of Mentalism. Professor Segno was the first fraudster to enter my collection way back in 1988. He sold success waves, yes, success waves, sent twice a day for $10 per year. That's $200 in today's dollars. This letter was posted from Mangia on December 14th, 1914, at the 1 penny New Zealand universal postage rate. When I bought it, I didn't know about this rate. I was looking for a 2.5 penny cover, and I thought this one should be it. And I was worried that maybe it was philatelic, maybe it was a total fraud. But I trusted the dealer who sold it to me. Of course, there was a premium for this cover, and it turned out to be a very nice example of the 1 penny New Zealand universal postage rate. And you can see Mangia right here in the middle of one of the Cook Islands. And yes, the fraudsters were even active in the Cook Islands, possibly the remotest of all their areas of activity. So what are my concluding thoughts? I don't believe there was a 1 penny rate from the British colonies to the United States in the early 1900s. At least I haven't seen examples that really support that rate. And waiting for somebody to tell me something special that make this view untrue. I'm already getting some correspondence from Richard Debney from the British Empire Study Group, who is giving me some information I didn't have before this presentation. British colonialists often thought there was a 1 penny rate based on the existence of such throughout the British Empire, the Empire 1 penny rate. The Dominion of New Zealand on its own decided in 1901 to have a universal 1 penny rate to international destinations. And this rate met with some resistance initially, but was accepted certainly by the United States during the heydays of the New York Institute of Science, and it applied to the Cook Islands. One thesis of this talk is that if an originating post office did not recognize a deficiency in payment for a letter and failed to mark it as due, it traveled through the mails without any effort to collect payment for this deficiency. I have found this to be true, particularly in my French colonies collecting, but I think generally true in all of my collecting. And there's the question, are there any examples of unrecognized, insufficiently paid mails receiving proper amounts due further downstream in the delivery route? And I know of only one example that I've counted, and I happen to have a scan of it, and I have to move over to the French colonies for this one. And what we have here is a group type letter card posted at the incorrect 15 centime rate in lieu of the proper 25 centime rate from the city of Obak in the Somali coast to Bern, Switzerland in 1896. It was posted to T. Saltzman, a Swiss judge and collector of postal stationery, so it's got a philatelic taint. But the deficiency of 10 centimes, this should have been a 25% postal stationery item from Obak. The deficiency of 10 centimes was not noted at Obak, who had a T in triangle at this time and was using it. They missed this one. There's no T in triangle under the stamp here. And they should have applied a T in triangle to the front of the card to alert the receiving office of the arrival of underpaid mail. This deficiency was not noted on transit via the port of Djibouti, where the French packet called. It was not noted on the French packet. Nobody else pays attention to this. And it was not noted in the Lyon postal station where it transited. However, the deficiency of 10 centimes was noted on arrival in Bern, where the manuscript 20 in blue was added for the amount due and the 20 centimes Swiss due stamp to properly collect 20 centimes from Saltzman in Bern. This is the only cover I've ever seen where short payment was noted and addressed by an arrival office. And I spoke to Harlan Stone, and we sadly learned that Harlan died on January 31st. I spoke to Harlan Stone about this, and he noted that the Swiss were a very fastidious group and attended to the small details. So this is the last cover I want to show you, which documents the demise of the New York Institute of Science. As noted, the hierarchy was convicted of mail order fraud in 1914. The organization was denied the use of US mails and ceased to exist. And this letter from Veracruz, Mexico in March 1915, during the height of the Mexican Civil War, is confirmatory philatelic evidence for the demise of the New York Institute of Science. And you'll note when it arrived in Rochester, it received this hand stamp, auxiliary hand stamp, fraudulent. The business of the addressee has been declared fraudulent by order of the Postmaster General. Very nice piece of postal history documenting the demise of the New York Institute of Science. So with that, we say goodbye to the New York Institute of Science and their strange ways of extracting money from the population in general. Finally, a couple of acknowledgements. As you know, now I'm an erstwhile collector of France and its colonies, and I now collect postal history from around the world from more than 60 countries. I'd like to express my special thanks to a cadre of more than a dozen collectors who put up with my unending questions in their areas of specialty, and a second and sometimes overlapping group of collectors who continue to highlight fraud covers in their areas of specialty for my consideration. There are more than 24 collectors in this group who are helping me to develop this fraud collection. And finally, from my first slide, I'll show my last slide. And this is a meeting of the New York group of the British Empire Study Group. This is a pre-COVID meeting. And you'll note in the background we see Eddie Bridges, who was speaking that night on part of his South African postal collection. And Joan Harmer, our co-chair here, took it upon herself for these meetings to create some culinary samples for tasting before the meals that related to the topic under discussion. And what we have here is a whole grouping of South African treats that Joan had prepared for us. But the night I remember is, and I don't have a photograph of it, is the night we had a talk on British American transatlantic mails. And Joan either hit a home run, if you're hit a grand slam, a big home run if you're an American, and if you're from Europe. She pulled off a hat trick, and she recreated the menu, the luncheon menu from the Titanic, the last menu served on the Titanic before it sank. And she created that menu for the people attending that British Empire Study Group. And to me, that meeting was one of the 10 philatelic highlights of my life. And I really enjoy those memories. So that's the end of the talk. I'd be happy for comments, corrections, questions. They're always appreciated.
Ed, that was fantastic. I mean, I had fun making it. I have to just add that. That was Carol, and it happened to be on the day that the Titanic sank. So that was interesting.
Quite a tie-in.
So okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Rob for questions and answers. But before I do, I just want to remind people I will be bringing you over. If you'd like priority, please raise your hand. If you don't want to come over, there is a way to decline it, but it goes by me so fast. So you'll be invited multiple times. If you come over, please turn on your camera so we can see you or not. And if you decide to stay over there, we enable talking so you could ask questions anyway. So Rob, to you, I see there's questions in the chat and in the Q&A.
You got it. Thank you, Joan. That was wonderful, Ed. Thanks for that great presentation.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, I did. We have a question from Louis Morel. Were the founders of the New York Institute of Science and May Edna Wilder ever prosecuted?
Yes, they were prosecuted, they were convicted, and their operations were closed down. I don't know what sentencing they have. I haven't picked up anything on that.
Okay. He also asks, why was it a standard practice to imprint the cover with postage due in the French or Swiss currency and in U.S. currency?
Well, the use of French currency is a UPU regulation. Okay, the UPU, as they formed it, they decided that the operational currency would be French currency, and everything else would be converted to British, American, German, et cetera, okay, according to the rules. So that's UPU. And the other part of the question was what? Was there another part?
No.
No, okay.
No. Another question we have here. Would those covers where the Rochester, New York was added to the address sent to the dead letter office? The
No.
dead letter office had a specialist. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
No, these went to a special desk whose job it was to enhance the address to make the letters a deliverable. Okay, the dead letter office is another area where they basically pull the letter out of attempted circulation and delivery and try to return it to the sender or just end up destroying it. I haven't seen anything sent to a dead letter office from any of the fraud covers that I've collected. It's about 800 of them now.
All right. All right. That was all the questions that we had in the chat box, but we have a hand up here from Richard Kohlberg.
Yes, sir. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Ed. How you doing?
Rolling along, as they say.
Fantastic talk. I have a question on the very last cover you showed that got the fraudulent hand stamped. You said that was applied at Rochester. Was that letter in fact delivered, or what happened to the
No,
letter?
no, it was sent back to Mexico.
Or was it?
It was sent back to Veracruz, and presumably, was returned to the sender.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Thank
And that, I mean, it would be wonderful if you could find it. That was put in some sort of conveying envelope at the Rochester post office that was addressed to the Veracruz post office. And the post offices knew how to handle this returned mail. And presumably it got back to the original sender.
Okay, thank you.
All right, David Steidley.
Oh, hello, David. Oh, he's got his
You're
mute
muted
on.
right now, David.
Getting
There
all
you
my success waves over the year, it seems you have, because that was a very successful talk. You really analyzed the heck out of your data. A couple of comments on the 1 cent rate. This was one of the themes of Protestant ministers in the United States as early as the American Civil War, where they would advocate for repeal of slavery. They wanted you to abstain from drinking, and they liked the idea of penny postage back to the United Kingdom, because there are so many immigrants that could not afford to write to their relatives who they left behind, because the rate for a letter was so extreme, even at 5 cents, once the UPU kicked in, based on just having almost no disposable income. So this was a big deal. And finally, it reached a point where in 1908, pushed by the Wanamaker, the same guy who was postmaster at the time and owned all those stores in Philadelphia, they made a deal with the British, and so they started a 1 cent rate between United States, Britain, and the reverse. So just to have people have, this was a big idea, and of course the New Zealand guy took it a little further, a little earlier, as you said. And I think you've got it right, that the large, sophisticated postal systems that the British colonies had, like in India and South Africa, they're not going to make that mistake in rate and not put the T on, where some of these small islands did not have that tight infrastructure, so that they caught every letter doing that. So not too big a surprise. Now the cover that had the 7 cent US postage due on instead of the expected 6 cents, that's certainly not because that the address was supplied and cost a penny more. I must, because I collect that 1901 to 1909 period extensively, I have a bookcase full of covers from that era, and I must have 50 or 60 or more, who knows. It's a common thing to have one of those addresses supplied by, and then the name of some little hick town in Iowa, population 100. And if they supply the address, oh, they're very proud and they put that stamp on. But there's never any extra fee. So enough examples of that.
Yeah, but this one is in combination with a short payment and a bad address. So you got two things going.
Well, yes,
and,
but
and that's the other data you have to look for.
Well, the bad address is what I'm speaking to.
Right.
That there was no charge for bad address.
Right. I showed you that French cover that there was no charge for the bad address. If you just had a bad address, they tried to put in, to get the right address. And as I said, the New York Institute of Science was an easy one because so much mail came to them through that New York arrival office.
Yeah, and I think Brody is right that stuff happens. So you think you're going to get 6 cents worth of postage, 2 stamps on there, and you get 7. Well, for some reason that happened, you know.
Well, I'm going to keep looking.
Well, you can keep looking, but
You know, we chemists never give up. You're a physicist, so you've got
oh yeah,
different views of the world.
Anyway, enough of me. Great talk. Thank you.
Good to hear from you, David. I really miss not seeing you at the Westfield Stamp Club.
Me too.
All right, looks like we have a question here from Ken Snelson.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm from Toronto, and I'm a collector of British postage U-mail. So a lot of what you've shown was of great interest. I collect into and out of Great Britain, but the question about whether an office could tax mail in transit, it was covered in the UPU regulations, which said that if the sending country did not put a T mark on, then the receiving country was to be considered to consider it as fully paid, except for obvious error. Okay, and that was a little as a weasel words, right?
Yes.
The British Post Office made extensive use of that and taxed a lot of incoming mail and mail in transit that hadn't been taxed by the country of origin. I have many examples from all sorts of weird places, like Cape Town to Russia, from Canada to Egypt. I've got many examples, but it was pretty consistent that the British Post Office, particularly if it came from a British Empire country, had no compunction whatsoever about sticking a tax mark on and taxing mail that hadn't been taxed in the country of origin. So it happens.
Okay. In my collecting, I just haven't run across that avenue. As I said,
Okay.
French colonies, and there I'm quite certain, based on the volume of mail I've handled, as to what was going on. And these are my British colony conclusions as a novice entering this field. But I'm afraid of saying something outrageous. I already have a couple of emails from Richard Debney, coming after my conclusion about these letters, and I'll be discussing that with Richard in email as we go along.
One other comment is that many of the British colonies around this time had penny stamps in red with the picture of King Edward VII. And they could be very easily confused by an office with a penny stamp from Great Britain with King Edward VII. And after 1908, the rate from Britain, as you mentioned, was reduced to a penny. So it would be quite easy to make the mistake of seeing a envelope from South Africa with a penny Edward VII stamp on and think that it was in fact fully paid, when in fact it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else?
Now, that was all I was going to say.
All right, Paul Rigglesworth, you've got a question.
Thanks so much, Rob. And Ed, thoroughly enjoyed your talk. As a collector of New Zealand stamps and postal history, I can comment on your covers from New Zealand.
Sure.
New Zealand introduced, as you said, the universal penny postage on the 1st of January 1901, and that was accepted by most of the Empire countries.
Yes.
The US accepted penny postage from New Zealand on the 1st of November 1906. Now that explains why your cover posted in August 1906 was paid at the UPU rate of 2.5.
I just made it on that one.
Just made it, yeah. You need to look out for one couple of months later or 3 months later, and you get away with the 1 penny rate then.
Okay, thank you for that information.
Pleasure.
By the way, I was correct on the Cook Islands cover.
Yeah.
Okay, and actually I have another one that I didn't show. Apparently the rate went up to 1.5 pennies at some point, and I have that 1.5 penny rate to Professor Segno also.
Right. Good.
which makes for a nice pair.
Okay, Jack Penfold, you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks very much. I found that totally fascinating. I have a sort of an unrelated comment about the tax thing, in that I grew up in Cape Town, and you had some covers there. I'm now in Courtenay, British Columbia in Canada, but you had some covers there dated from the South African colonies, dated 1912 and 1911. You had,
Yes.
you said some covers from the Transvaal, and they were postmarked in Colesberg and Graaff-Reinet, which are actually both in the Cape Province.
Uh-huh.
And you had another one also with a Transvaal stamp on it, which was also from Cape Province town, Berkeley West. Now, what happened was that the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910, but they didn't issue any definitive stamps until 1913. And so they allowed the stamps from the 4 different colonies that joined together to form South Africa. They allowed those to be used in any of the 4 colonies. So they're called interprovincials, and it's sort of a collecting area for some people who collect South Africa, that you get these interprovincials, you get a Transvaal stamp with a Cape Province, from a Cape Province town and stuff like that. And I think there was another one from Natal,
Yes.
which had a Transvaal stamp on it, because the Natal, I couldn't quite see the province name in there, but Natal didn't issue a 1 penny red King Edward VII stamp. So I just thought you might be interested to know that those covers are sort of even more interesting than just the tax thing, the insufficient postage, or the 1 penny rate.
I have to create sort of a spreadsheet with towns, dates, and locations.
I think there were just 4 of them. The rest of them were sort of all good.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, thank you much. Sorry.
This is why it's nice to do something like this, and get some input from people who know more about these situations, and find out where I am in all of this.
I know, it's amazing. You never know what you'll learn. It's sort of the opposite of stuff happens, you learn stuff. I learned a lot from your stuff today too, so thanks very much.
Now, before Duncan says anything, I have to do a full disclosure. I didn't set forward your email to Ed because I didn't want to throw him. I know what it's, I guess I personalized this. I said, you know what? I don't want to throw Ed off game. And he already sent me his slides. And I envision like another rewrite coming. So Duncan, fair disclosure, I will send it right after the meeting. So over to you.
Yeah.
I have a number of books on US postal history because I have covers going to the US. And one of them is the Beecher Warukovitz book on international rates, which has a list of incoming rates to the US. Having seen the presentation, you can ignore most of the email because most of the email are rates that came into effect after 1914. The one exception is the Bahamas, which had a rate apparently in 1908. And you covered New Zealand and Cook Island, so and explain to me why that happened earlier than the one from the UK. So anyway, when you get the email, you can have a look at it and ignore 15 out of 16 of the entries, because you've explained 2 and 13 don't apply.
Okay.
Joseph Bowling, do you have a question?
Yes.
Hello, Joseph.
Hello. When you said that the U.S. did not accept the New Zealand universal rate, did that mean that they automatically assessed the postage due, or did they return the mail?
I'm not sure at this point, and I don't have any evidence other than the fact that the the US, did not accept the rate. I can't remember oh, no, I read it someplace. It might have been in something on the web. But I can't remember at this point.
Well, one of the viewers here put something in the chat to the same effect. So somebody listening in here must know a little bit more about it.
That was probably me. New Zealand should have assessed any underpayment, but if they didn't, as was mentioned by another questioner, then it was up to the US to intercept that mail or deliver it.
My problem is I'm not looking for these specific examples. I'm looking for mail to the New York Institute of Science, and then trying to extract information from that pile. So I miss a lot of covers that might be relevant to what I'm doing, simply because I'm bypassing them for the wrong address. It's very crazy to collect an address. It's hard to it's hard to search. Okay, nobody puts address. Well, I have a couple of people I bought from before on eBay, and they know what I'm looking for, and they will put in New York Institute of Science or Oxypathor in their titles now, so I'm sure to catch them.
Intriguing.
And of course, if the mail was returned and it wasn't put into philatelic channels by the Institute, so you wouldn't have had access to it.
Yeah. But sometimes you just have luck, and you don't know why that happens. Okay. Professor Segno put out a little vignette stamp showing his portrait and saying something about Segno Success Club. And he had that originally in English, and I found an example of this little vignette stamp in French. And then I was looking at the other day some registered covers from the period of Segno. And on the back of a Costa Rican one was one of these vignettes in Spanish. And the guy wanted an outrageous amount for this cover based on its postal history, but I don't think I'll ever see this vignette used on any envelope. Not that it had any postal purpose; it was just used to seal a registered letter. But there's Professor Segno in Spanish, his picture on this letter. It's not to the American Institute of Mentalism and his organization. It's actually to a group in Washington, the Winter Company. But it's a nice piece. And I just came across that by accident. I didn't even, and I wanted one of those on a cover. And now I have one in Spanish. So. Okay, anything else?
Well, Ed, it's Laban Harris. I don't know how to use this computer, but I collect mail from Great Britain to the U.S. from 1908 till 1930s, which is a 2-cent rate. And I thoroughly enjoyed that part of it. And I learned a lot about the different ways. I knew how the mail was handled. Because I collect also. I collect too many things, and I collect the first bureau, so I've been through that. But I thought it was very interesting the part from New Zealand, and I would really like to know about how it was handled before 1906. The 1 penny rate, because I wonder what some of this might have been printed matter. That's what I'm thinking. The 1 penny rate was printed matter, but normally it's marked.
Yes, printed matter.
But it could be printed matter.
Yeah,
and it could have. The post office could have known it's printed matter and accepted it for that reason. I don't know.
But printed matter would have to be unsealed and have no messages inside. So
yeah, but you don't know when you get it. Your letters could have been sealed after the fact too. You don't. I mean, printed matter is pretty tricky.
Yep.
Anyway, but I enjoyed your talk very much.
Well, it's good to hear from you. I haven't seen you in quite a while, and
I hide.
I was sort of a regular customer for many, many years and enjoyed coming to your booth.
I
and-
have got so many new covers that you could spend days going through them, and you probably might find a few things for yourself.
Were you coming to Nojex, the next Nojex?
I am.
Well, I think I'll roll over there. I'm on a walker now, but I
Oh
think
my goodness.
I can
You're
get there
you're too
with
young for
Uber.
that.
With Uber
Pardon?
and my walker. I'll be there and I'll go through your stuff.
Okay, I look forward to seeing you.
I'm happy to come.
Mr. Harris, thank you for joining us tonight. It's
Well,
always
I was looking forward to hearing an area that I was somewhat familiar with, and it was very interesting. I'm glad I attended.
terrific.
Jerry
Jerry,
Petrowski.
Miss Harmer.
Excellent presentation, Dr. Grabowski. And mine's not a
Ed,
question.
the name's
Okay,
Ed,
Okay, Ed.
especially for you with that last name. Oh man, you're a Landsman. I don't know how to say that in Polish.
Anyway, my it's not a question, it's a comment. I really enjoyed one of your early covers or early slides, and that was the one that was addressed to the cartilage.
Oh yeah, I could give you a whole talk on the cartilage company.
And on that slide, you showed a picture of the mechanism, as it were, that was going to make you taller. And it
Yes,
reminded me of some therapy I received probably about 45 years ago when I had a back and neck injury. And one of the discs, I guess, had pinched a nerve. And
Yes.
one of the treatments I had was they put a harness around my neck, and it
Yep.
was attached to a pulley on the ceiling, and they gradually tugged on it, so it actually stretched me a little bit, took that pressure off those discs. It was fine. I could move my head around and whatnot. The problem was when they let me go down again, and that pain came back. So that they still use that kind of stretching exercise 40 years ago or so. They probably do now too. Anyway, that's my comment. Excellent presentation.
thank you. I actually have a wonderful picture of the device. I have a German patent that they took on the device and they got it. It's a three-page patent and it shows the entire device, a really high-end version of it. And it's quite an impressive piece of ephemera. That's the other fun part of this. I just showed a little bit of the ephemera, but there's loads of wonderful ephemera.
This thing that they had for me, and it was a harness that went around and basically just pulled up.
Yes,
In
yes.
fact, after a few sessions, if they were really busy, they'd strap me in this thing and I control the rope or chain or whatever it was. Anyway, that's another thing. That's from many years ago.
Makes me think of that Laurel and Hardy episode where they stretched them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Douglas Nethercleft, you've got a question?
Yes, thank you, Ed, for a fabulous display. But as maybe the only Britisher here, I really have to point out that this was in the era of pound, shillings and pence, LSD. And although the stamps bore the word penny, it should have been the letter D instead of P on some of your slides.
Yeah, I struggled with that mightily. P and D, what should I use, where and when? And I just gave up and put them all as P's.
Well, I think that if you're going to exhibit this internationally, as I hope you will, you've got to change it to a D. The word penny is fine, but the letter D instead of a P would be appreciated by the British viewers anyway.
Okay, well, maybe I'll go through and change them all. This reminds me.
Okay, but thank you so much.
This reminds me of the time when I was in grammar school and we were practicing handwriting, and I had some phrase that I had to write on every line in my notebook. You know, this is like the second grade or something like that. And I made the mistake of writing that line on the last line on the page, which was not a complete line. And the nun who was my teacher got so mad at me for writing incorrectly on that last line. She really gave me a hard time. And that night, my mother and I were up all night erasing the writings on that last half a line in the notebook. I made that mistake. How to correct it. So I'll change all those P's to D's.
Well done, thank you.
Now, Michael Dixon, did you want to share your screen? Because
Did you address me?
yes, I did. I was wondering if you wanted to share your screen. You seem.
No, not particularly.
Okay.
But hello, everybody, and thank you, Ed.
Hello, Michael. I haven't
Hi.
seen you for a
Not for a
long time.
while.
And I remember you in Washington 2006 and the wonderful time and
God.
show.
Well,
it was a grand experience. I showed up early and, spent 3 days mounting exhibits with you guys. And it was just a lot of fun.
well, maybe I'll get over to the other side of the country and we can roll our rollators together.
Hey, I know a couple of good places to roll.
Okay. Look forward to it. Thanks again. Absolutely
Good hearing
fascinating.
from you, Michael.
I had no idea of this story that you've just told. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael always has the best one of the best backgrounds. I love his background. Okay, that's it. We're all quiet tonight.
We are.
And
Hello, Ed. I haven't seen you for quite some time.
Mike.
But your presentation was very nice, very interesting.
Who's speaking now? I can't see.
You can't see me.
That's Spike White.
No.
No.
You can't see me. You should be able to.
No.
Is that better?
Ah, there you are, Michael. Okay. I see you
Very
now.
nice presentation. Very interesting. There's not a lot I can say because you've covered most of the bases. But what I was interested in is what were the actual dates, the start and the finish of this project that you've undertaken? It seems to be circa 1903 to 12 or 13.
What I'm doing in the fraud area. Actually, for the New York Institute of Science, it's 1900 to 1914, 1915. They were put out of business in 1914, okay? For Professor Segno, it actually runs from 1900 to 1937, okay? Because his operation ran in Los Angeles for that whole time. He wasn't there for much of it, but other people were running it under his name. So that's an interesting one. And then I have a small collection of the oxypathor, a medical device that polarized your skin and made it readily susceptible to the entry of oxygen, which cured all diseases. And the perp there, the fellow who made the most of this scam, was actually sent to Atlanta Federal Prison and served about 6 months' time for selling about 40,000 of these things at $35 a pop. $35 is $700 in our purchasing power. So he made out like a bandit and ended up just serving a few months in jail. So, and the last fraudster, Doctors Peebles and Bobo, Dr. Bobo finished up in 1934 when he committed suicide. And I think his fraudulent endeavors, combined with the fact that the federales were after him, seriously after him, he just couldn't take it anymore and called it a day. And I actually show in lectures his Michigan death certificate, where it notes that he shot himself in the mouth with a gun and the bullet lodged in his brain. So you get into all kinds of strange things, following up in this. It's really amazing. And you meet a lot of people who are not philatelists, which is a lot of fun because they have different views of things.
And
the Pathor device that oxygenated the blood, I actually have 3 examples. And when I give lectures to stamp clubs, I hook the president of the stamp club up to an oxypathor. And I try and, I give the lecture and we'll see if he improves or she improves in any areas while I'm talking. So, I just do a lot of crazy things these days. I spoke at the one to the meeting to hook the president up to, but you can't carry a chromed stovepipe capped at both ends with wires coming out of it and electrodes on an airplane. They're certainly going to think you're carrying a bomb. So I had to mail the thing a couple of weeks early to make sure it was there when I spoke. So it's a lot of fun, but there's some serious philately, and I'm having a grand time, and I'm not spending the money I spent in the French colonies, so I'm not I'm not dipping into the family treasures here to mess up my estate. My son's going to have these fraud covers to sell, but he can probably figure out how to do it, and we don't have to worry about him losing his shirt.
Jerry.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question of you and Rob, but Ed was talking about
Oxypathor.
Pathor.
Okay, I think it was the January issue of the American Philatelist last year. Okay. I have a 15-page article on the oxypathor fraud.
Okay, the reason I ask, I know somebody who has a thematic exhibit on blood, and I wonder if she's aware. I'm sure she's aware of that thing anyway.
Well, it turns out a number of people marketed it. There was the creator in the 1890s, and people thought it was a good idea, so they stole it from him. And so I have an original version of the oxypathor, then one from the principal success story of the oxypathor, and even one that was made in Japan for the Japanese market. And so, as I said, this collection gets you to strange places.
Yeah, thank you. My question to Rob and Joan was, it seems to me that sometime in the last year or two, I listened to a webinar on mail fraud, or again, was that through the British Empire Study Group, or did I say someplace else?
Ed gave a talk on Dr. Segno.
Yeah,
on the mail fraud.
Professor Segno and the European African colonies. Was that it?
Okay, so that was, I wasn't sure whether that was you or not.
Yeah, that was another aspect. That's Segno. Those are the success waves.
Yeah.
Twice a day. I don't know, I'm not a physicist, but I don't think success waves travel around with the curvature of the Earth. He never solved that problem. So if he sent them out from LA, I don't think they reached New York.
Yeah, that fraud part was stuck in the back of my mind, and I said, I've heard something about that. I couldn't remember where I had seen it.
That's me.
Okay, thank you.
Duncan.
Yes. Well, if you're doing frauds that are later, then if you want to look at colony rates to the US, you can then look at 13 of the 16 that I told you could ignore. So it's a good thing that that Joan will send you the email.
Okay, well, I'll look through it anyway. It's always interesting. You always pick up little tidbits that somehow turn out to be useful.
Mhm.
I'm trying to get Richard Debney to unmute. But I haven't been successful.
Yeah, he said he would be attending, but he wouldn't be questioning me, but he sent me some things to think about.
Because I was waiting for the horse's mouth, but it's nice of him to attend. He's one of my another favorite guy. So that's it. We're all talked out.
Well, I've got a question or just a thought. Ward Scientific was based in Rochester, New York, and it was a hugely successful company selling both to scientists and schools, etc. And I'm wondering if these fraudsters were kind of piggybacking on Ward Scientific, the with that same name, Scientific, in there.
I don't think so. This guy, E. Virgil Neal, Xenophon Lamont Sage, who was the principal behind the New York Institute of Science to begin with, he actually had a career in hypnotism between 1890 and 1900. He and his wife were practicing hypnotists, and they made a fortune at it. And he developed a lot of his ideas that were included in that first correspondence course. I've never seen any tie-in with the New York Institute of Science and anybody else. There's also a big website maintained by three wonderful fellows called the IAPSOP, IAPSOP, International Association for the Preservation of Spiritualist and Occult Periodicals. Okay, boy, I remember that. Boy, I'm even smarter than Donald Trump. Oh, no, I didn't say. But anyway, they developed a website, a fraud website, all sorts of fraud. Okay, not just postal, which is my shtick. And put together this tremendous website on fraud and made it available to everybody from, I think, 1850 to 1950, mostly US. And I don't remember any tie-in of the New York Institute of Science with somebody else in Rochester.
Well, I wasn't thinking of a tie-in. I was just thinking of sort of stealing the
Okay, stealing
name.
or appropriate.
The Scientific in there.
Ed, what was the name of that website again? So I could.
IAPSOP, IAPSOP. If you just Google that, it'll bring you right to it. And it's very simple to use, search. And you'll even find some stuff from me there. So I've dropped in, actually, I might drop in this presentation too. They're very, very happy to put my stuff up. So, but I've gotten a lot of information out of that website, and they contribute a lot themselves when they put this stuff together, like on Professor Segno, they've written a lot.
Yeah, my Zoom etiquette isn't very good, but it's Mike Graff sticking his nose in to thank you so very much for a fantastic presentation. I'm just flabbergasted with all these Zooms are so good. I really enjoy them. Thank you to the group, and more power.
Well, thank you for joining us, Mike. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We have a lot of fun.
Yep.
And then after every one of these, you should start going through your collection to see if you have something.
Well, that's one thing. We had Dave Steadley here a while ago, and he was asking me some questions and giving some comments. One of the things I would do at shows is I would go through collections, and David had one with his 1 cent Ben Franklin stamp on it. that was a fraud cover, and you know, I made him take it out of the frames, and I bought it from him right there at the show. And Nick Lombardi, who some of you may know, he's got a 2-cent Washington Shield exhibit that won the CFC at the last big APS show. Nick has one fraud cover that I'd love to have, but I haven't been able to talk him out of it yet. So, and it's hard to come up with something that he needs that I could trade him because he's got such an extensive collection of that stamp.
And you're speaking for the Westfield Stamp Club.
Yeah, well, this talk was originally starting out for my local Westfield Stamp Club where Nick is president. And it was going to be a 10-minute show and tell. And then it just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So then I thought I'd premiere it for the Westfield Stamp Club and get a chance to practice it. But things got screwed up and I ended up giving it to the British Empire Study Group first. And next month I give it to the Westfield Stamp Club.
Great.
I thought of asking Larry if I could give it at the Collectors Club, but they'll probably be having regular meetings shortly, and I don't have anything, you know, mounted that I can show in frames for this. I don't know if I'll ever do an exhibit. Exhibiting seems to be the last thing I get to.
Yeah, the hybrid meetings are going to be interesting when we go back to the Collectors Club, because you know, because you're going to have to think of a presenter is going to have to put it in a Zoom and on the display, because I think it would be unfair to, you know, us in, you know, watching it via Zoom not to be able to actually see the frames. So.
The GBPS has done hybrid meetings for a while, and they haven't had many Zoom meetings for the first quarter of this year. But there is one of the presenters who's putting together a Zoom of a meeting that was not Zoom, and it's on post-1980 GB postal rates.
I'd be curious to see how other people are doing the hybrid meetings, because it's tricky for philately because of the frames.
Yeah, and the hybrid meeting, they don't seem to be able to send pints of beer to us meeting when they go out to the pub for lunch and have a 2-hour break.
Well, you guys missed the food that we would have at the British Empire.
Yeah, no.
For the fraud talks, what did I do? Oh, I did all fake foods. So like there was soy ice cream and sausage and pepper that was made with tofu and.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to get Joan really thinking for those meetings.
That was fun. But Carol's was great. The timing was great for Carol. And she's very special. It was so nice of her to come in and give the talk. So, yeah. See, y'all miss, you could come to New York and.
It's been a very interesting evening, but I think I'm going to have to leave, and I look forward to future British Empire Study Group sessions.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jerry. Goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, yeah.
It's labor, and thank you again for everything. I'm going to leave too. I've got to go eat.
Okay, and I'm going to hold you to that NoJex show later on. So
I'll be there.
Okay, and I'll be there right when it opens.
I'll look forward to seeing you.
Start digging through your stuff, because I always find something.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Frank. Ed, that was fantastic.
Well, I hope you liked it. And
really good.
Yeah, I don't know whether I like the fraud aspect better than the rate aspect, or the other way around. Because they're both, you know, it's very interesting because the rate
yeah,
was.
no, it's interesting history, and you know, how it's amazing they could be so successful. I mean, you have to realize for these people, their potential clientele was the world. Okay, and if you know, as they lost customers, they could add new ones. Okay, it was just a matter of advertising. And then you come to the question, why were they so successful in Hungary? Much more so than any other place, more so than Italy, more so than France. Okay. Just to show you the contrast, I have over 150 covers from the Hungarian part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and I have 10 covers from the Austrian part. Okay, and that's just, you know, quite a contrast. Why did that happen? Of course, Hungary has 1,000, maybe 2,000, who knows, small villages. Okay, and the small villages are often exist in their own. I mean, they have their own cultures, you know, dressings, the way they dress, the food they eat, and music. They have their own music. So there's a lot of local independence there, and but people who are very susceptible to the New York Institute of Science.
From what I've heard too, Hungary has got the largest number of dialects of any language.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can only read a few words. Fortunately, the 2 Hungarian auction houses I deal with have provided a ready English translation for their websites. So first couple of auctions I had to operate in Hungarian. that was tough going. I don't recognize anything. I could find search. That was a key thing.
Oh.
That would be
The
scary.
difference between the Austrian and the Hungarian, you have to also think about the fact that back when these covers were first being made available, there may have been somebody hoovering up all the Austrian material.
That could be. I mean, one of the things I found, you know, you wonder if these covers are endless. That there is a limit on them, and I'm finding great difficulty now getting particularly Professor Segno covers. I might get 1 or 2 a month now, and that's it. And so there is a limit on these things, and yeah, maybe somebody gathered up Austrian ones, although people don't seem to know about this fraud aspect. It's not a general thing. Although I lost 6 New York Institute of Science covers this past week on eBay, where I got way outbid, and so I don't know if somebody's picking up on this or not.
That's interesting. Who else would want to do Segno? Who's going to go in competition with you?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe one of his relatives has heard about me. Remember, one of my co-conspirators in the Segno system is Larry Harnish, and
All right, are we all talked out?
okay, I'm going to go get me some supper.
Oh, yeah, thank you again, Ed. And I sent that email from Duncan. So
Okay.
you should have that in your inbox.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank everybody left for coming.
Thank
you, Ed.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Ed.